The biggest money laundering bust in the history of Singapore just got even bigger. Now we've got gangs involved. We've got big banks involved, including names like Deutsche Bank and Citibank. There was a flash crash in crypto last week, a day after this story broke, that may have been caused by this story. And it's starting to look like this whole thing may really just be an effort from the Chinese government to try to contain the collapse of the whole Chinese economy being brought about by the fall of the Chinese housing bubble. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and last week I put out this story detailing how almost $1 billion had been seized in the biggest money laundering bust in the history of Singapore, and how all these different individuals and companies were involved, including one that was previously detained in Taiwan for being a Chinese spy. And in that video, I said that over the coming days and weeks that this story was going to get even bigger, and so far it has not disappointed. Heading over to Bloomberg, dated August 18th, Singapore seizes more houses from Chinese money laundering gang. Singapore banned the disposal of 11 more properties as the police pushed forward with the investigation into one of the country's biggest money laundering and forgery cases. This brings the total number of real estate owned by the individuals under investigation and their spouses to 105 properties, the police said in a statement on Friday. The properties, including 7 detached houses at the city-state's luxurious oceanfront Sentosa Cove, is estimated at 831 million Singapore dollars or 612 million US. The portfolio of properties included 79 condominium units and 19 commercial or industrial spaces. A few of the suspects were arrested in the city-state's most prestigious homes, known as good-class bungalows, something I talked about in that original video. It's important to point out here, though, that those houses, those good-class bungalows, were not owned by the accused and were not part of the seized assets. And I pointed that out in the video last week, that good-class bungalows, it's illegal for foreign nationals to even own them. You have to be a Singaporean citizen to own a good-class bungalow, so that didn't really make sense to me. Well, it turns out all the members of this money laundering ring were just renting those properties, so these are not included in the 105 other real estate properties that have already been seized in this operation. But it's this article here in Asia Sentinel from August 18th that really sheds light on just how big this operation may be. Singapore's crackdown is just the tip of the iceberg, billions of hot money sloshing through the banking system. The monumental crackdown on money laundering that began in Singapore on August 15th, possibly triggered by the Chinese government in its Operation Fox Hunt campaign to reel in stolen money estimated so far at 1 billion Singapore dollars, is only a tiny fraction of the billions, perhaps trillions, of dollars hidden in the island's republic banks. Gotta read that last part again, guys, because I feel like maybe some of you didn't take the walk with me there. They're saying perhaps trillions of dollars could be hidden in the island's republic banks. That kind of money, guys, we're not talking about small-time crooks here. We're talking about organized crime, highly connected government officials from all over the world, all funneling their dirty money through Singapore's banks. This story has the potential to be as big as the Panama Papers. While the Singapore police force arrested 10 Chinese individuals on August 15th for their suspected involvement in this case, they're believed to represent only the tip of the iceberg for the true scale of the current money laundering operation. According to multiple reports by a Singapore Chinese language newspaper, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce, on August 18th, hundreds more Chinese mainlanders in a syndicate nicknamed the Fujian Gang may be involved, with another 60 local property agents also implicated and assisting with the investigation, a local euphemism for being questioned. Apparently, the guys involved in this money laundering case were already famous in Singapore. Here we go in gutsy. Fujian Gang allegedly linked to 1 billion Singapore dollar money laundering case. According to that Singaporean Chinese media outlet, an insider source has disclosed that a group allegedly involved in the money laundering case, known as the Fujian Gang, could potentially consist of hundreds of members. An undisclosed real estate agent interviewed stated that the individuals implicated in this case are all hailing from China's Fujian province. Remember, these guys held passports from all over the world. A lot of them were fake or forged, and all of them hail from the same province of Fujian in China. Within this group, there are several main factions with surnames like Su, Wang, Hu, and Chen. While these factions might not be closely connected or interact frequently, they're all aware of each other's existence. Among the apprehended, Su Haijin and Wang Dehai are suspected to lead the Su and Wang factions respectively. And besides blowing their fortune on pot-bellied plastic teddy bears, these guys also were known for throwing money around big time at local nightclubs. Extravagant lifestyle of the Fujian Gang. When delving into the extravagant lifestyle of the Fujian Gang, a broker who was interviewed unveiled that many among them relished the nightlife, often splurging amounts exceeding $100,000 in a single evening at nightclubs. Furthermore, they have a penchant for acquiring luxury automobiles through parallel importers and indulging in designer bag purchases at upscale brand boutiques. The most interesting part is that these individuals seem to have a fondness for singing, as they often set up karaoke rooms and mini golf courses in their houses. So the next time you're bored on a Friday night, why not consider dropping $100,000 at a nightclub, or spend a chill evening relaxing with some Chinese spies and money launderers over karaoke and mini golf in their good class bungalow. But enough about the small-time karaoke crooks over at the Fujian Gang. Let's talk about the real crooks, the big banks. And here we go in Bloomberg, Citi and CIMB used by accused in Singapore's laundering scandal. Citigroup Inc.'s Singapore subsidiary and CIMB Group Holdings are among banks affected by a major money laundering case in the city-state involving about 1 billion Singapore dollars or 736 million US. The two lenders were used in 2020 and 2021 by some of the foreign nationals who were arrested in raids this week across the country, according to charge documents seen by Bloomberg News. Turkish national Wang Shuming was charged for allegedly submitting a fake document to Citibank Singapore, while Cambodian national Su Bao Lin was charged for falsely claiming he was an executive director of a firm in a supporting document to the U.S. bank. Meanwhile, two Chinese nationals Zhang Rujin and Ling Boying, I know Jack's pronunciation is terrible, were charged for seeking to cheat CIMB Bank about their ownership and sale of property in Macau. The Monetary Authority of Singapore said on Wednesday that suspicious fund flows, dubious documentation of the source of wealth, as well as other inconsistencies prompted unnamed banks to file suspicious transaction reports to authorities. And it wasn't just Citi and CIMB, also Deutsche Bank getting in on the action. Again in Bloomberg, Deutsche Bank is creditor to alleged launderer's Singapore firm. Deutsche Bank is a creditor to a Singapore company whose two directors were arrested for their roles in an alleged money laundering and forgery ring. The bank has a charge that was registered on May 22nd against Golden Eagle Assets. The firm's directors, Zhang Rujin and Lin Boyang, and 8 others, were indicted in a Singapore court last week for money laundering and forgery involving assets worth over $1 billion. Deutsche Bank's facility to Golden Eagle Assets is secured against all monies at the investment holding company, according to corporate filings reviewed by Bloomberg News that didn't specify the facility's size. Golden Eagle Assets hasn't been named in the criminal investigation. So Deutsche Bank loaned a bunch of money to this Golden Eagle Assets company. 2 of the directors of that company were just nabbed in this money laundering ring. So this credit facility that Golden Eagle Assets had with Deutsche Bank, it's unclear whether this was actually part of this money laundering operation or if Golden Eagle Assets have been seized or not. All we know is that 2 of the people who run the company that Deutsche Bank is loaning money to got caught up in this thing. Their assets got frozen. But I'm sure the good people at Deutsche Bank had absolutely no idea that these guys might have been involved in any way in any kind of illegal activity. I mean, it's not like they were throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars around at karaoke night at the local club, driving a Ferrari, or dropping 30 grand a piece on a bunch of pot-bellied Care Bears. Now, in that original video from last week, I had theorized that crypto was involved in this because Singapore is one of the biggest hubs for cryptocurrency in the world, and money launderers just love to use cryptocurrency these days. And so I theorized that somebody big in crypto was about to blow up over this story, and it wasn't a day later that this happened. Check it out, an instantaneous 10% drop in the price of Bitcoin. Now, nobody knows what actually happened on August 17th when this big drop happened. There's a lot of theories out there about Binance. There's theories about Rollbit. There's people talking about Tether. All we know is somebody got spooked and dumped an awful lot of Bitcoin all at once, enough to drop the price by 10% in a matter of minutes. And Bitcoin's price has not recovered ever since. Now let's talk about what I think is really going on here. And I got my first clues in this article in Asia Sentinel, also from August 17th. Money laundering bust puts foreign wealth in Singapore on notice. And it's this section of the article that I want to focus on. Was China behind the Singapore crackdown? The crackdown came after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Singapore only a week earlier. The possibility that this money laundering sting against so many Chinese passport holding individuals happened on the behest of the Chinese government cannot be discounted. An office dedicated to fighting money laundering will be set up in the operations office at the People's Bank of China. That's the Chinese central bank. The office's creation is part of Beijing's efforts to establish a coordinated investigation system to combat money laundering, the Chinese state-owned newspaper explained. But is it really money laundering that the Chinese government is trying to stop, or are they really just trying to lock the exits closed and prevent Chinese citizens from getting their wealth out of the burning building that is the Chinese economy? Now, last Friday in my weekend live stream, I talked all about the collapse of the Chinese housing bubble. I reproduced the whole presentation I gave at the Silver Symposium last year. I went on for 90 minutes about how the population collapse in China resulting from the one-child policy is really behind the mother of all asset bubbles, which is currently imploding in real time in China, as evidenced by the imminent collapse of Country Garden and Evergrande, who just filed for Chapter 15 bankruptcy here in the States, and the trust company Zhongrong, who's missing bond payments, and a dozen other companies that have all gone belly up because of the biggest speculative asset bubble in the history of the world, the Chinese real estate market. Now, what does that have to do with money launderers in Singapore? And the answer is capital flight. China cannot allow capital flight right now. Now, the typical response from these big government types all around the world, every time there's some kind of economic calamity, the answer is always the same: lower interest rates and print money. Or as I like to say, Zerpenber. Now, the Federal Reserve here in the United States has been able to go Zerpenber for years because we are the world reserve currency. And so when we print dollars, we steal value from existing dollars which are held all over the world. Most dollars are actually outside the United States. But when it comes to the Chinese yuan, they don't have that exorbitant privilege. The Chinese currency is not the world reserve currency. So China can't rob other countries by printing yuan the same way the United States robs the whole world every time we print dollars. So China needs to go about quantitative easing or money printing much more carefully. And if they're not careful, they might actually make their situation worse. Now, first and foremost, when you lower interest rates, it spurs more loan growth, and it's a way to try to stop the collapse of the housing market. But keep in mind that interest rates elsewhere around the world are going up. So if China starts lowering interest rates to try to spur more credits and more loan creation, which are currently down 90% in just the last month, well, you're going to create an even bigger gap between the interest rates being paid on Chinese debt and Chinese bonds versus what's being paid in, for example, the United States bond markets. They're going to create a financial incentive for Chinese citizens, especially wealthy Chinese citizens, to get their money out of China and invest it in the United States or in Japan or in Europe. So the Chinese can allow wealthy people to take their money out of China. And so they're starting to crack down on capital flight. Now, the other thing China can do besides lowering interest rates is to just outright print money. But keep in mind the yuan is already very weak against the US dollar. And if you print yuan, you're going to weaken it further. Now, there are some steps that China can take to try to offset a weakening yuan. China still owns about $800 billion of US government debt. So the Chinese central bank can dump that US government debt in order to get dollars, and then dump those dollars in order to buy their own yuan, thus propping up the value of their own currency. While that might partially offset the decline of their own currency, keep in mind the first step in that equation, dumping US government debt. And with bonds, you have to remember the correlation between interest rates and bond prices. If the Chinese government dumps too much US government debt, then they're going to crash the prices of that government debt, which would be very painful for the United States, but it would also increase the interest rates on those government bonds. So in defending the yuan, they would actually be creating additional incentive to get your money out of China because they would be driving US interest rates higher. So either way, whatever futile gesture China tries to do in order to offset the collapse of their housing bubble, they're going to create an incentive for wealthy Chinese to get their cash out of China. That means selling Chinese assets, driving Chinese interest rates even higher, further crashing the bond market, further bankrupting developers, and sending your money over to the US. So China is trying to lock the doors to trap everybody inside the country so that they're not able to dump their bonds or dump their real estate projects and take that money overseas. And the first step to doing that is to break up money laundering rings or anybody who has made a career out of helping Chinese get their wealth out of the country. And that reminded me of this story that I covered in my morning live stream just a few weeks ago. Shanghai woman in focus as probe shows fear of capital exit. Chinese state-run media outlets are adding credence to speculation that an executive who helps wealthy families move their money to the U.S. was among those detained last week for illegal currency trading as President Xi Jinping's government moves to prevent capital outflows in the face of economic woes. Linda He, as she is known in English, is the chair of the president of the Hualian Overseas Consulting Group, a Shanghai-based firm that helps rich Chinese citizens acquire visas to Western nations, secure spots for their children in elite foreign schools, and facilitate overseas investments, according to its website. But this paragraph illustrates the why. The case highlights China's efforts to stop wealthy citizens from moving cash overseas, reflecting the dire state of an economy still reeling from strict COVID curbs, property struggles, and tighter regulations of the private sector. The case highlights China's efforts to stop wealthy citizens from moving cash overseas. So long story short, guys, we've got over $1 billion in assets, 105 different properties seized. We've got the Fujian Gang, who likes to drop 100 grand at the nightclub while singing karaoke and playing with potbelly Care Bears. We've got Deutsche Bank and Citibank getting involved, and we've got the Chinese government trying to trap their citizens in their own economy to prevent the money from leaving China, because China knows what they need to do to try to stop the collapse of their housing bubble. They need to print money and lower interest rates, all things that are going to create incentive for Chinese to get their money out of that country, and China can't allow that to happen. I told you this story was going to be big, guys, and it's only a week old. It's going to get even bigger, and as the updates come in, I will stay on top of this. And until next time, live small and dream big.